Every dog owner struggles with their dog doing unwanted behaviors, and there's a lot of confusion on why your dog does behaviors like reacting at other dog or jumping on guests or barking at the mailman at the front door. This video, I'm going to explain why your dog does these things and, more importantly, how you can stop it. Let's get right into it. In this lesson, we are going to talk about your dog's behaviors, how they respond to certain events that happen in their life, and how you can have a desired outcome, your dog's behavior to be desired by you as well as your dog. Let's think about it. We've already talked about reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcers, there's negative and positive reinforcement. Those encourage a behavior or make a behavioral response more likely to be repeated. A punisher, what does a punisher do? We have negative punishment and positive punishment. They make a behavior less likely to be repeated. The dog is going to seek staying away from a punishment, and the dog is going to seek a reinforcer, always. So there's three parts to it. There's a stimuli, there's a behavioral response, and there is an outcome. What happened? The stimuli could be literally anything going on in your life. And this is where a lot of positive-only dog trainers, they are missing something because they talk a lot about management. If you ever see someone on social media or online talking about, oh, you just have to manage your dog, the management is managing the stimuli. It's not managing the behavioral response or the outcome. All it is controlling the things going on in your environment, in your dog's environment. And yes, at first we do a lot of managing, especially at the beginning of training, when a dog does not know how to live in a human world. In your household, there's a ton of management going on of the stimuli, the things going on, but it's not rooted in reality to constantly, for the whole life of the dog, control the stimuli, right? You live a life. Things go on in life. You go out on a walk. It's not practical to try to stay away from every single dog. It's also not practical to never have someone walk in your front doors because your dog jumps on them. It's not practical to do any of these things. And it's a huge hole in training when all we do is managing the stimuli and the things going on in the environment. So I have 6 or 7 examples for you on how we can change the behavioral response of our dog based off of the outcome. And so you can think about it. Stimuli, stuff going on in the environment. Behavioral response, what does your dog do? Do they bark at something? Do they react? Do they run the other way? Your dog has behavioral responses to everything. Are they neutral? That could be a behavioral response. And the outcome, was that reinforcing or was that punishing? Most things are going to be either reinforcing or punishing, and there are some things, you got to stick around and watch this whole thing, but there are some things that we want right in the middle. We want a neutral response. We don't want it to be punishing, and we don't want it to be reinforcing. We don't want any response. There's a lot of things. One example, you're out on a walk with your dog and another dog walks by. We want the response to be neutral. We don't want the dog to be scared. I'll put a little N here for neutral. We don't want the dog to be scared of the punishment. We also don't want the dog to seek the reinforcement of the dog. Fear-reactive dogs are usually fearful of this, which then leads to reinforcement. I'll explain that in a second. And frustration, happy, go-lucky dogs that want to see other dogs, they struggle with it because there's tons of reinforcement when they do it. So that's our first example. This video is taken from my online coursing community where I teach you exactly how to have the best possible relationship with your dog. If that sounds like something you're interested in, click the first link in the description below. Back to your video. And this is for you people with reactive dogs. If you don't have a reactive dog, this will be helpful for you to know, and we'll cover some other examples first. But what is the stimuli? Number 1. Stimuli is a dog walks by. Completely out of your control. You can't. I mean, you can, and I've seen a lot of owners do it for a long time, where every time they see another dog, they go the other direction. But It's not practical in your life, and it also, your dog never becomes happy because they never actually get over the response and the outcome. So if you want to make your dog not happy for the rest of their life, just try to avoid every single dog, and it's never going to really help your dog. So the stimuli, dog walks by. The behavioral response is your dog barks and lunges. And we'll, just to keep things easy, we'll use the example of a dog that reacts because they are happy-go-lucky and they're starting to get frustrated because they can't say hi to another dog. So why do they bark and lunge? Because it has a positive outcome. And you might think, Ethan, well, no, barking and lunging, the dog is stressed out. It's obviously not a positive outcome. Like, right, you know, the dog would have a lot better of a time if they didn't bark and lunge and just walked with me. Bingo, you're right. But your dog doesn't naturally do that. Your dog, at one point in time, and most dogs that suffer from frustration reactivity, they suffer from it because that dog had been out on a walk, whether it was you, previous owner, whoever, and your dog, people walk up to your dog and say, oh my gosh, can I say hi? Or can my dog say hi to yours? And it's a great way to ruin your dog's trust because there is going to be an outcome. We don't want that because there's going to be a reinforcer or a punisher. Your dog is either going to have a really good experience if they love other dogs, or they're going to have a really bad experience. This example, they have a really good experience. Next time a dog walks by, they might not be reactive on day 2, but with a ton of data points, you know, you can think about our data point graph, the ton of data points up here, the more we build up data points, the more the dog is put in a situation and wants to seek that reinforcement. The more data points we give there, the more they want to do that, because this dog said hi to another dog out on the street after the person said, oh my gosh, can our dog say hi? And the dog had a positive outcome. The dog was like, oh my gosh, that was cool, right? Like, it was fun, it was exciting, I got to meet this other dog, we like checked each other out, all that. That's a reinforcer right there. And so in your dog's environment, they are going to seek that out. When you are in a similar environment with similar stimuli, your dog is going to seek that out. What happens over time is we might let our dog do this for a while. You know, it develops over time slowly, right? The dog gets more and more excited to go pull over the dog, and we let them. And then one day we hold them back and we don't let them say hi. And it's like a crackhead looking for crack. They are searching for that reinforcement. They're like, they need that reinforcement because they've been reinforced so many times on this up here on the data point that they are so excited that they're looking for that reinforcement. And eventually it turns into the barking, and the lunging is reinforcing in and of itself because it's almost kind of satisfying that itch that the dog needs. And so the outcome of this situation is reinforcement, because the dog gets to bark, lunge, and they're reinforced to do it because it's a pleasurable experience. I'm not going to talk about the fear reactive dogs quite yet, that we talk about in a different lesson, but let's think about how we can change this. So we'll go 1A. Dog walks by. Same exact stimuli. Behavioral response, what do we want the behavioral response to be? We always, before we start to try to fix this issue, we have to identify what do we want the outcome to be. And in order to identify what we want the outcome to be, we have to identify what the behavior is. So we want the outcome to be neutral. And I'll write this a little smaller. Maybe we'll put an N for simplicity. Neutral. We want that behavior. And so if we want a neutral response, how do we get there? Well, we have to step in and add punishment. We have to make this behavior of barking and lunging undesirable. We want our dog to think, oh my gosh, that was uncomfortable. I don't want to do that again. Once we do that, our dog has a huge hole in their training. All they associate is a dog walks by, okay, I can't bark and lunge. That's what they know. They don't know what they should do. They just, there's a hole. And so what we have to do there is we then, when we get our dog to stop barking and lunging, when we add punishment, dog stops barking and lunging, then we step in and add some reinforcement. That's a little R. But we're not using a huge amount of reinforcement because we don't want this experience of just a dog walking by to be crazy, like, oh my God, let me look for a treat. No, we want it to be neutral. And so in order to have a neutral response, we add punishment, fill that hole in training with some positive reinforcement showing the behavior that we want, and then we get to a neutral response. So that one's a little complicated because we're dealing with reactivity, and there's a ton of different causes of reactivity, but you're starting to understand this concept. Let's go over a different example. So, number 2, your dog, what is the stimuli? A person walks in your front door. Well, I bet most people, and you're here watching this, so most people, their dog will jump. Their dog gets overly excited, jumps. Some dogs are so excited that they bark, 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 but they get so excited. Why do they get so excited? Why do you think? Every behavior that is repeated has been reinforced. Every behavior your dog does, good or bad, has been reinforced. Most of the time, a behavior that's reinforced, it's reinforced by you doing nothing, by you not stepping in, or even you trying to say, hey, stop jumping, like off. But you're not adding, when you do that, you're not adding enough punishment. You're adding like a tiny little P for something that gets a huge R. And there's no way that like just a little punishment of like, hey, no, stop, right? You're not using enough punishment there. So the behavior is the dog jumps. Okay. Why do they jump? They jump because they are reinforced to. They jump, they get attention. It gets exciting. It is self-reinforcing. Even if the person that they are jumping on does not enjoy them jumping, it is self-reinforcing. They are getting excited. And that is adding reinforcement, the overexcitement, the energy, the craziness, the barking, whatever. But it is self-reinforcing. Them jumping, they're going to continue to jump. And the only way to get them to stop jumping is to make that a undesirable experience. So what do? They jump, they get reinforcement. Well, how do we address that? Okay, person walks in the front door. Dog jumps. We add punishment. And if the reinforcement that they get is just a normal sized R, right? If this was the reinforcement that they get, we are adding a big old P. We are overdoing the punishment to communicate that that is wrong. We are making it clear. We are leaving no room for error. We are leaving no reinforcement there. We are adding enough punishment to get them to stop what they're doing. This is the issue that most people do, is when they're trying to correct a behavior, the reinforcer is this big, and they try to correct their dog, even if they're using the right tool, but they try to correct their dog right here with that tiny little P, and it doesn't help because you're not actually correcting the behavior, discouraging it. So we add a big old P, punish the behavior of jumping. Not because we're trying to be mean or a big boss, but we're trying to communicate that that is wrong. We don't do that. There's no need to get excitement. And when we add that punishment, the reinforcer, there's a whole of the behavior because they only know what's wrong. They still don't know what's right. So what do? We step in and we add a reinforcer when they don't jump. That could be attention. That could be a treat. In this situation, I'm less likely to use a treat. I'm more likely to say, good, in a calm manner, because we want the response to be neutral. We don't want the response to be positive because the response is already reinforcing. The response is already good, and we don't want it to be a huge, good outcome. We want it to be a nice, calm response. And so we add a little bit of reinforcement, but overexcitement is only going to add a huge R, and the dog's going to keep getting excited and doing the behavior. So we add enough reinforcement to match the punishment when they're doing the right behavior. And that way, when we add punishment, we are discouraging the behavior enough to get them to stop what they're doing. Right? This is how you get your dog to make good decisions on their own, not telling the dog not to jump. A lot of owners, this is one of my pet peeves, is they teach their dog off or stop or down when a dog jumps on people. And the dog knows the command, but is just like gives the person the middle finger, like, F you, I'm going to keep doing this because it's reinforcing. And they try to add a command to this behavior that should just be implied. We should make this a neutral response. Our dog's allowed to go up and greet someone, but what they're not allowed to do is get overly excited. And the reason they get overly excited is because it is reinforcing. That's how we address that behavior. The next one, this one is a thing that I think a lot of dog owners struggle with, is a delivery person comes. Could be a UPS guy, could be Uber Eats, who knows? But your dog's sitting there looking out the front door, or they hear a noise, and they see someone walk in the front door. What is their response? Usually, it's bark. Well, why do they bark? They've barked because it's reinforced. It's actually negative reinforcement. This is the first one that's really negative reinforcement. It's negatively reinforced because they bark, 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 bark. Person walks up, delivers the package. The dog doesn't really understand that, like, the package is getting delivered. That's the reason the person's there. Dog barks, 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 barks. Person walks away. So we've removed something and reinforced the behavior. That's why the dog barks, and the dog will continue to. It's the same thing with noises. If your dog hears noises and barks, 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 barks excessively because they hear a noise, it's because we are adding reinforcement. The dog is trying to get this noise to go away. The dog is trying to get this thing to leave. And they are getting reinforcement out of barking because eventually the noise stops, or the person leaves, or the person goes. And this behavior was reinforced. So what do? We correct the behavior. We have to use a tool, proper tool, but the dog is barking, 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 barking. We step in, we correct them. No. And if the dog's reinforcement was about this size, we have to add enough punishment, again, to leave no confusion that was wrong. If this was the reinforcement, we add a huge amount of punishment. Enough where the dog is like, oh, got it, okay. And so we just added punishment to the behavior, and that is how we start getting the dog to the outcome to be neutral. So, right, we add a punishment, okay, and then we leave a hole in training, again, right, we leave a hole in what we want them to do, so when they don't bark, when they stop barking, we're not just like paying them to stop barking, but we're setting our dog up where they stop barking. Okay, got it. All right. And we're adding a little bit of reinforcement, right? We're just adding some reinforcement thereafter to communicate this is what we want you to do. And that creates clear expectations where a person walking up to the front door, delivery man, the behavioral response is neutral. I'm going to erase this. The behavioral response is neutral because the outcome is neutral. If the dog gets reinforcement or punishment here, they are going to do that behavior. Right there, if they get reinforcement from barking, okay, they're going to keep doing it. If they get punishment from barking, that's kind of a more extreme, like less common example, but the dog is going to try to bark, 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 bark to get that thing away because they're scared of it, because they get punishment from it. So, right, we have to make this really clear. Barking, 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 wrong. We want a neutral response, and this is how we get to that neutral response, because the more the dog barks, the more reinforcement they get, because the person leaves. And it's also, for some dogs, it's exciting. So just the act of barking is reinforcing. But if we want a neutral response, we add punishment to the behavior, then reinforce the behavior after at least of the desired behavior, and we have a neutral response to the behavior. Okay. let's erase all these. We're gonna get into 4, which is, this is a very common one and also one of my pet peeves. Getting the leash. When you take your dog out on a walk, you walk up, you grab the leash. I give a lot of advice in my YouTube videos, and it's one thing to take advice, it's another thing to actually implement them in your life. If you want to have the best possible relationship, well, my NCA slip leads might be the perfect tool for your dog. I have produced them myself. They are a 1/4 inch thick. They have a spring-loaded stopper, and I have 4 and 6 foot versions. These are the best slip leads on the market. If you're looking for a slip lead, go buy today and check out all of my other products. Back to your video. I bet you, at least a lot of people, their dog goes berserk, or at least goes crazy and gets overly excited. And they're not happy when they're overly excited, but the stimuli is getting the leash. Okay. The behavioral response to getting the leash is craziness. Whatever craziness is to your dog, could be barking, could be running around, could be jumping on you, whatever. It's craziness. Why is the dog crazy there? Because what do they get? Reinforcement. It could be positive or negative reinforcement, but they get reinforcement for that. Sometimes, and this is one of the stupidest things a dog owner can do. Oh my gosh, you want to go out on a walk? This is going to be so exciting. Let's go out on a walk. This is going to be so much fun. Oh, you want to go on a walk? Well, what you're doing is you're making this not neutral. You are manufacturing the craziness because you are adding so much reinforcement. You were reinforcing the behavior. You were like telling the dog to do something that at the end of the day, you probably don't want them to do. You don't want them to get excited. You don't want them to be crazy. Setting yourself up for failure on a walk, for reactivity, for everything. It's not healthy. How do we touch that there? How do we address that? Some people just getting the leash out because the dog knows they are going out on a walk, they start to get excited and they get overly excited. We're like, oh my gosh, we just need to hook the dog up on a leash and get outside. So they get excited, we put them on a leash, we go outside. So what did we just do? We reinforced the craziness because we put them on a leash and gave them what they wanted. So how do we do that? How do we address this? I personally, as a dog owner and a dog trainer, I want this to be a neutral response. I don't want this to be some big crazy experience. So how do we get a neutral response? Well, we want to punish the excitement. We first off don't want to say, oh my gosh, you want to go on a walk? No, like you're setting yourself up for failure and your dog up for failure. No, we just walk up, grab the leash. If your dog gets overly excited, we address that behavior. We correct them. We add punishment, and again, more punishment than the behavior was reinforcing. We add more punishment there to get them to stop what they're doing. Communicate that that's wrong, stop what you're doing. So you add enough punishment and they stop what they're doing. Got it. Awesome. This is where you now reinforce the proper behavior. You add some reinforcement when your dog is calm. That could be pets. That could be a treat. That also could be just taking your dog outside because that's the easy thing to reinforce because that's what we've been reinforcing this whole time. Just taking our dog outside, that is their reward, and their reward is being calm. When they're excited, the behavior of excitement is matched with punishment. That way, it's less likely to be repeated, and then the behavior of calm is matched with reinforcement. Enough reinforcement just to get the point across that this is the proper behavior. Got it. Okay, let's get on to the next one. Jumping on the couch, and this one I'll just kind of explain to you, but I'm gonna put the pen away. Your dog jumps on the couch when you sit down. The stimuli is you sitting down, and your dog gets up and jumps on the couch. Okay, well, I personally don't like my dogs jumping on the couch. Well, at least not on their own. So, stimuli, you sit down on the couch. Your dog jumps up, gets on your face. The behavior, your dog jumps up on the couch, gets in your face. The outcome, reinforcing. At least more times than not, the behavior of getting up on the couch was reinforcing. You gave them pets, you gave them attention, you gave them something. What happens when you have family friends over? Or your parents over? Or a friend? And You don't want homeboy, your dog, jumping up on the couch. It's not fair to your dog because every other time, you again, talk about a data set, you've given the dog a data set up here, this is what we do. We jump on the couch, you get reinforcement for jumping up on the couch. Now suddenly, you want the behavior to be here. You want there to be no, you want it to be neutral. You don't want there to be a response. But they have all of these data points, so it's not fair to your dog to just sometimes let your dog not jump on the couch. Instead, what's a lot more fair to your dog is set the expectation you don't jump on the couch. So, dog jumps up on the couch, we add punishment. We discourage the behavior. Got it? Awesome. Okay. The dog now wants to not do that behavior, but what's the behavior that we want them to do? We want them to not jump on the couch, and we want to reinforce that behavior. So they jump up on the couch, add enough punishment to outdo the reinforcement that they've already been getting, and then we reinforce the behavior when they are not on the couch. Pretty clear. Okay. Demand barking for food and attention. Why does your dog demand bark at you? This one is like one of the easiest ones to figure out. And people do it because they're trying to love their dog and give their dog love, but in reality, they're just hurting their dog mentally and hurting their relationship. But their dog, whether it be their dog, like they're sitting down at the dinner table and the dog barks, or right, the dog looks at them and barks. Why does the dog bark? The stimuli could be a million things. Could be you sitting down, like whatever. The response is to bark. Your dog barks. Why do they bark? They bark because they're getting reinforcement from barking. They're getting something. So if your dog ever barks at you and you give them what you want, what they want, even if it's 1 out of every 10 times, they're going to seek that reinforcement, especially if you give them something high value. If they bark at you and you give them $100, they're going to keep searching that behavior, even if 9 out of 10 times they don't get the reinforcement. They just get a neutral response. You tell your dog, shoo, get off, whatever, leave me alone. They're still looking for that $100 that you gave them. You just keep giving them $100 every now and then. They're going to keep searching that. This is why ignoring the behavior doesn't work. When you ignore the behavior, if you're really, really consistent, maybe over the course of a long time, you can kind of have the dog forget that they ever got reinforcement, but it doesn't really work. This is why you have to punish the behavior. The dog comes up and barks at you. You correct them. You communicate no. So, what did they just do? They had a behavior. The outcome was negative, right? The outcome was met with punishment. They had a poor outcome from barking at you. Okay, well, they might try it again, but when they don't bark at you, that's when you can give them some reinforcement. When they bark at you and you correct the behavior, you need to correct them enough where you're outdoing the reinforcement. I hope this is starting to make sense because, you know, it is a little repetitive, but everything your dog does comes down to these situations. There's a stimuli, your dog has a behavior, and they are reinforced to do it. You doing nothing most of the time reinforces the behavior. One more thing, thresholds. You put your dog's leash on, you're walking through the front door, or the door opens. Really, the stimuli usually is the door opening. Door opens, what does your dog do? Well, a lot of dogs just try to bolt through the door. Why? A lot of the time, what we do is we try to close the door on them so they can't get out. Okay, but sometimes, occasionally, once in a blue moon, once out every 10 times, once out every 50 times, they get out the door and they get a huge reinforcement. This is so fun. This is a big reinforcement. This is awesome. And so even if it only happens 1 out of every 50 times or 5 times, however often, your dog is going to keep trying to run out the door to get this reinforcement. They're going to try to get that positive outcome because the R here, significantly, the 1 out of every 50 times they get that huge R, if they get like the punishment of them, usually, most people, the punishment of a dog trying to run out the door is the door kind of gets closed on them. They say, stay, whatever. It's like, it's the tiniest little P, the tiniest little P. So even if you have 100 of these tiny little P's, P, punishment, 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 they're tiny, tiny punishment. You can't outdo this huge R. You need to do that a bajillion times. And that's why, what do? Well, I want you to pause this video, answer the question. Think about what you do. We allow the dog to make a mistake. We set the dog up for failure. We open the door, we correct the dog. That correction could be them getting the door kind of closed on them, right? Like not aggressively, but clear that they don't do that. But that's not really enough to add a punishment, especially dogs that really love bolting out the door, like crazy dogs like that. What we have to do, oftentimes, put them on a leash. Whatever tool we use, it has to be enough. If they get this huge R, think about how big of a P. They get this huge reinforcement. We have to add a really big punishment because this reinforcement is already huge. They've gotten out the door once, they've ran around, had fun, we're chasing them around, this is a blast. We have to add a ginormous P, a bigger P than the reinforcement that they get, where we communicate that behavior is wrong. So in this situation, we corrected the dog. We gave the dog a pretty firm correction. Okay. The dog just had a behavior and the outcome is bad. They got a punishment. Okay. So we're going to try opening the door again. If they get a big enough punishment, if it's clear enough, they're going to be like, oh, maybe I'm going to think about that, right? They are not going to seek the punishment. And then that's when we can add reinforcement to the proper behavior of not going through the door. This is a situation where owners tell their dog stay or sit when they open the door. But it doesn't teach the dog anything. This is not a place for obedience. This is a place for a relationship and communication and understanding how dogs learn. All you do is tell your dog to sit and stay. Yeah, they might get a little bit of reinforcement out of sitting and staying, but none of that is going to outdo that huge, ginormous reinforcement that they get when the dog does get out the door, even if it's 1 out of every 100 times. So this is the equation to all of your problems with your dog. And every situation we handle a little bit differently, but we have to understand your dog's response. And in order to get to a proper outcome, we have to get to the right behavior. Hope you found this video helpful. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.